All right, we are all set, Senator French.
We're ready to go. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone. I am Harold French, Senator from District 7. Today, we will be holding a meeting of the Senate Commerce Committee. Before I get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Commerce Committee, I find that due to the state of the emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected, and only selected, legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube, and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during this meeting if there are any problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.newhampshire.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during the meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So we'll start with the roll call. Senator Gannon.
I am Senator Bill Gannon. I'm at beautiful Phillips Pond in Sandown, New Hampshire. My junior high daughter is Zooming, and so I will be making her lunch. So make sure we stop for that, Senator French.
12:30. Senator Susie.
Good morning. I'm Donna Susie. I am at my home in Manchester, and I am alone.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Hello, Kevin Kavanaugh. I'm at my home in Manchester. I'm currently alone. My youngest son is virtual learning in the house.
And once again, I am Senator French. I am broadcasting live from my home in Canterbury. Doors are locked once again and all secure. I am alone. So I'd like to get started today. We're going to be taking up Senate Bill 107. Cameron?
Okay, the prime sponsor being Senator Perkins Quokka. Senator, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka, and I represent Senate District 21, the city of Portsmouth, and the towns of Madbury, Lee, Durham, Newington, Newmarket, and Newfields. I am the prime sponsor of SB 107 relative to financial assistance for businesses affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Main Street Relief Fund, when it was designed by Gopher last year, was designed for Main Street businesses. Instead, the unintended consequence was that many of the small local Main Street businesses lost out in this program, and instead it was large multinational chain stores that received the assistance. Many of the local small businesses were unable to access the Main Street Relief Fund because of the arbitrary date imposed on their formation prior to May 30th, 2019, and a requirement to produce financial statements from 2019. This cut out a large segment of new small businesses, which fill new needs in our communities and create the most new jobs at a time when they were really struggling. SB 107 would ensure that newer businesses will be able to access any future discretionary federal relief funds that are allocated to the state, regardless of their date of establishment, because the newer the business, the more critical supporting it is. These new businesses invest in their business well before they can open, and often their opening is delayed due to various factors beyond their control, such as permitting, financing, title, supply chains, or other items. They do not have capital saved up from previous years of operation to fall back on in times such as this. They deserve our support, and I think with a few tweaks, we can support their operation going forward through this bill and other efforts. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present SB 107. I'll be happy to try and answer any questions you may have. I've also been meeting with a group of small business owners who missed out on the Main Street Relief Fund because they were too new, and I believe a few of them will be joining us on this call to speak.
Great, Senator. Thank you very much. Will these small businesses have to show any records or anything to the banks in order to get the funds?
I think that, directing the policy at the level we are through the bill is just that they would be eligible or not declared ineligible just based on their data formation. But given that the statute sort of dictates at a very high level that that's the policy, Gopher would still have discretion to come up with rules which would require, businesses to produce the records they could. I do think that it's important to go through the exercise of trying to figure out what records those would be in some detail, because the way the program was designed last year, it simply was really difficult for even businesses that were formed before the state because of the way Gopher set up the rules, which of course was appreciated because it was aid, but I think this is just one of those gaps that I'm hoping we can work together to fill.
I think you're right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Senator Gannon?
Thank you. Good morning, Senator. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Awesome. So is there anything, Senator French was sort of alluding to it, if you're a new business, most new businesses fail. How do I know I'm not just giving money to a business that wouldn't be successful? Are they going to have to show something that they have like a steady stream of, like a new restaurant, they usually go out of business. How do I know that I'm not just funding 90 businesses that wouldn't go under anyways?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Senator Gannon. And, some of the small business owners on this call, I think, have specific circumstances they can tell you about that that might provide useful examples. I think they're all well aware that, for example, new restaurants have an 80% failure rate. But for example, there's one business that I've been working with that she bought from a prior owner, and because she formed, a new LLC that took over the assets of that previous business, there were records to compare with a prior year, but she just didn't qualify based on that technicality. And so in that case, for example, there would be a way to demonstrate that that had been a previously functioning and successful business. In other cases, a business that opened, say, in June, we'd have to work together to figure out how we can sort of evaluate that business. But banks go through that exercise when they decide to make an investment. And so, I think working with the financing parties, for example, could be a way that we can gain comfort on specific diligence items to figure out who could be funded.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, the next person on my list is Miriam Kovacs. However, I do not see her here. If you are here, you can raise your hand in Zoom using the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, you can dial *9. In the meantime, we'll go to the next person on my list, who is Elizabeth Tompkins. Let me see here. Okay, Elizabeth, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go right
Thank
ahead.
you. All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commerce Committee. I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Elizabeth Tompkins. And as of September 2019, I became the proud owner of a fabulous boutique in Market Square, Portsmouth, called Puttin' on the Glitz. I'm entering my 5th year there, second as owner. I want to thank you first for your time and attention. I am here to testify on behalf of Senator Perkins Quokka's bill, SB 107. I do have 4 questions. I'm not asking rhetorically, but I will continue to get through my testimony. It's hard not to reappeal my case, so I'm going to stick to these facts. First of all, my question is why, by last fall for Main Street 2.0, why are we still with May 30th, 2019? I would dispute that by saying last fall, I could foresee we were not out of this pandemic and some of the newer businesses needed help immediately. I have no doubt that you understand that the work that goes into a business plan by any responsible business owner, our plans and arrangements, as Senator just mentioned, don't always go according to plan. You know, none of us knew pre-pandemic. Most of us had some sort of resiliency plan for 3 to 6 months. We are now entering a 2nd year of a global issue that we thought 3 weeks, we thought 3 months, and here we are. I would like to also bring attention to anyone who opened a business in the last 18 months. We were working on it 2 to 3 years prior. So I am repeating the senator, but it's to really lock down that fact. A little history about me, just because it leads into this. After my first discussion with the previous owner, I set out to score. I took a year of courses on how to be a business owner. It was a dream of mine. I handed over my letter of intent in February of 2019. So that just shows you it took that many months to do the proper business valuation that a bank requires to secure the loan to purchase the business. And then I had the misfortune of a merger between the banks once I secured that. So it delayed it week after week. The first year of that was getting my ducks in a row for the 2 years of due diligence. The second year was going over 5 years of the owner's previous revenues, and they were solid. And I want to add that I had the end of Q3 and all of Q4 of 2019, and I exceeded my projections and the previous owner because I brought in new product, I brought in new customers, and that is the fabric of these communities. I love Portsmouth. I've been in the Seacoast area since the 80s. I've seen businesses come and go, and I hear you, Senator Gannon, about why a new business, but I wouldn't have been given this loan, and that's where it's hard not to appeal my case again. This leads me to my, so most of us have been down 40, 60, 20%. Yes, the shutdown helped me. Yes, I received an economic injury loan. However, that is a loan, and it was to recover that 3 months of shutdown, and I have made it last and work for me till now. And I was scared in November because it is truly a cash flow issue. I don't like asking for help. That's not how I got here. And but this is my only source of income at this point. So this leads me to my second question of a robust appeal process. So I've worked closely with my loan officer, Joe Horvath of Cambridge Savings. I work with Chuck Gilboy because now since before my letter of intent and since I'm a client of Small Business Development Association, and they were really devastated as well that there wasn't more of a robust appeal process. I made 2 typographical errors. That was hard to correct. And then it just became no to the date. There was no way to discuss extenuating circumstances. So that is my second question, is how can we fix the the appeal process? And as far as being new business, I know if I don't make it, there will be corporate hat shops that show up because they now know I'm doing what I'm doing with all sorts of things. So that's on my tail, and that's a little scary. This shop was put on the map by the previous owner. We're in local publications and we're one of a kind, and I'm doing everything I can to keep that. And most of us, this is our chance to shine when you have a new business. And we've with the loss of foot traffic and tourism in Portsmouth, it truly is a cash flow problem. Question 3, I'm almost done. What are plans for redistribution for funds that might be repaid? For some of the businesses that might have received too much assistance, they have to repay that. They received assistance from multiple sources. Do you or can you find a way to funnel that back to some of us? And this leads me to my last and final question. For those of us who are here today, for myself, and I've written to the governor, I've written to senators, and I landed in Rebecca's inbox, and that's why we're here with this bill. But if we're not Main Street, as this grant was called, then who is? And I implore you to vote yes on some sort of variation of this SB 107. I don't mind answering questions as regards to my business individually, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tompkins, is your business still open?
Yes,
And is it open regular hours?
we are reduced just these 2 months because of the reduced, even in a good time, January, February slow down anyway.
And I've been in Portsmouth a little bit in the last few months, and I have noticed there's a big change in Portsmouth from 2 years ago. Foot traffic's way down, I suppose.
Yes, I would say foot traffic, it varies. I would say consumer confidence is the big key. Until, maybe vaccinations, we're all hoping, last summer it was, oh, Christmas will be great. I was down 23% from the phenomenal fall I had before. I had comparison. I have a lot of people who stop in and they're worried about me, and they're so glad I'm still there. My payroll protection ran out. I'm waiting for, the next round. So that's why I do my own marketing. I've cut corners to the best of my ability. I did purchase a business without a shoppable website. So I'd love to add that during the shutdown last year, I didn't remain idle. I went in and started manually entering every item. If you've ever been to our store, there's thousands of it's a high inventory. And now, that's assisted, but I was hoping for grant money to use to get a shoppable website built because there wasn't one. And I've held tight because of, I've got it's my source of income and pay my basic debt service. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? And again,
Thank you. Thanks for running the business. You're the heart of our state, so we need you out there. You said you're on target earlier. Is that target for a personal target? Is it for profitability? Is it, and so a two-part question. You said you're on target. What's it for? And then without this relief, would you be in danger of going out of business?
First part of the question, by on target, it was my projections for my business plan model that in order to meet my basic debt service of the loan to purchase the store and inventory, basic business needs, and then at the very end you pay yourself. That's what I meant by on target.
Okay.
Second question, if things don't pick up the foot traffic, so our busy times and our transition times are September, October, March, and April is when our new inventory comes in. And last year I stopped all orders. And I will say, when I closed, I didn't owe anything but my basic debt services. I paid everything down, and I still sit in that. I have a very good relationship with all my vendors, and we've decreased orders. Am I in jeopardy without assistance? 40, 60. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, okay. It's a real, because for me, that's facing, when you sign a loan like this is where it gets personal. Everything went into it. So if I lose this business, I don't have another source of income until, it means bankruptcy. Yeah. So, you stay hopeful, but the risk is high.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
anyone else? Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you for your time.
Cameron?
The next person on my list is Kimberly Clark. Kimberly, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. So my name is Kimberly Clark. I am the owner of Clark's American Bistro and Chow Trattoria and Wine Bar, both located in the heart of downtown Durham on Main Street in downtown Durham. I want to thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you today in regards to Main Street relief funds and help that is needed for small businesses. I'm going to actually change up a little bit of what I was going to say because I want to address the earlier statement about restaurants and failures. So we started planning our Clark restaurants about 3 years ago. My husband had owned Benjamin's restaurant in Durham in the late 80s and early 90s. If anybody's ever been to the University of New Hampshire, Benjamin's was one of the most successful restaurants in the heart of downtown Durham. Many years passed, we raised children and they went off to college. And he looked at me one day and said, I really miss the restaurant business. And we had opportunities presented to us. So Young's restaurant that was in the heart of downtown Durham, and previous to that, Grant's restaurant, Kenny Young came up to my husband one Saturday morning and said, I'm retiring. I would love for you to take over this space. There has been a restaurant in this location for over 100 years. The residents of Durham are the most underserved population in the state of New Hampshire because there really wasn't a family-run business in the downtown Durham area for lunch and dinner. A previous restaurant called Bella's had gone out a few years ago, not out of business, but to move out of town. They moved to Londonderry when their lease expired because they wanted to move back to their home area. The Durham residents were desperate for a family restaurant that they could come with their kids. Parents coming to visit their kids on the weekend at the university could come to breakfast or lunch or dinner. And then Chow opportunity came because the residents really needed a nice place to go to for birthdays and anniversaries and celebrations because the New England Center had gone out. And the New England Center had been in business for years and years and years, and there was a huge need there as well. So we created a business plan about 3 years ago. The strategic business plan was presented to the banks. We bought the building that Chow Trattoria is located in and revitalized that building in the heart of downtown Durham Main Street. We moved into the Young space, revitalized that space and turned it into a lunch and dinner location. And unfortunately, a pandemic occurred. Chow was scheduled to open last February, and then we were delayed because of supply chain issues. We were then supposed to open in March, and we all know what happened last March. So as a result, we ended up opening Chow in June. When we opened, we were immediately embraced by the community, and they supported us in any way they possibly could. That pent-up need and desire to eat out on Main Street was there and present. But however, as the pandemic dragged on and on and on into the fall and now into the dark days of this winter, we applied for the Main Street Fund. And we did not qualify because our opening day was past that May 2019, even though our corporate formation and the investments in the property had occurred much longer ago. Again, we started building the Chow Trattoria building and revitalizing that building on Main Street over 2 years ago. And so not opening until that time is what made us not qualify for that fund. Innovation in new business and Main Street and family owned. My husband and I are the sole proprietors of these businesses. We have put our heart and soul. We employ 32 people between our two companies. We have single mothers. We have students putting themselves through college. And we have been warmly embraced by the community that want to see us survive. We know that we will survive one way or the other. But the Main Street funding would allow us the breathing room we need to get through the rest of this pandemic. We haven't somehow, some way been able to survive through all of this, partly because we started a delivery service using our own people rather than Grubhub that takes 20%, using our own people to do the deliveries. We have a lot of students that work for us that are in the testing protocol at UNH. But part of being in the University of New Hampshire in the heart of downtown Durham is when their test cases go up, our business goes down. Recently, the test cases spiked on campus and we saw a decline in our business of 40%. But what we do know is this: we are going to make it through this. The residents of Durham have embraced us, have wanted this kind of opportunity to have two restaurants. We're 60 steps apart from Chow to Clark's. We literally have residents now who will come for a glass of wine at Chow and then go over and have dinner at Clark's and flip back and forth between the two. And they are so happy to be able to do that in the heart of downtown Durham. Main Street businesses and innovation and entrepreneurship is the heart of America. And at Clark's American Bistro, it's the heart of what we are doing in downtown Durham. We're proven entrepreneurs, we're proven business owners, and the arbitrary date that was applied to the Main Street funding that cut out folks like us, we're just asking for a reconsideration of that. And I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to any other ideas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Bradley, good to see you here.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Clark.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Cameron, do we have another speaker?
We do. The next person on the list is John Daniels. However, I don't see him on the list. If he's here, he can raise his hand. The next person on the list is Patrick Kelly. Patrick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good morning, and I want to thank everybody on the call for hearing my testimony. And I actually sympathize with some of the earlier speakers on some of the challenges that they've been going through. My name is Patrick Kelly of Strike 9 Brewing. I own a brew pub at 8 Somersworth Plaza in Somersworth, New Hampshire with my two brothers. We purchased the building in October 2018, which was located in an economic revitalization zone in the city of Somersworth. The building was vacant for about 10 years in the plaza near City Hall, for those of you familiar with Somersworth. My brothers and I funded the venture using savings and borrowing against our 401k funds. We did secure a loan from a local bank to complete the refit of the building, which included things like upgrading the power and adding a sprinkler system, and essentially meeting local, state, and federal codes to operate a microbrew production facility and tap room. We opened the business to the public on September 15th of 2019. At the time, we had employed approximately 18 employees in different roles as chef, wait staff, and brewery personnel. We were forced to close on March 16th of 2020 per the governor's order. We did reopen Strike 9 Brewing on April 17th of 2020. We did this as a takeout service only. We did not design our business as a takeout business, so this did present some challenges for us. Although, once we got into summer, we really started to see an improvement in the overall business. When November came with the outdoor seating essentially going away for obvious reasons, we saw a tremendous fall off in our business. So the business essentially fell off about 60 to 70%. I would like to address Senator Bill Gannon's question, because I think it is relevant around, will the state, more importantly, taxpayers, be funding a business that's at high risk of going out of business? I personally believe we should be entitled to some sort of relief funds, given the fact that we really had no visibility into a pandemic coming within the first year of opening our business. But at the same time, I also believe that we should, as a business, we should provide documentation, including balance sheets of our financial ability to maintain the business on an ongoing basis. So I would certainly be open to that, and also appreciative of any support that you can provide to any businesses that unfortunately had been open, less than a year prior to this pandemic impacting us. So I'll keep my statements brief. One other point I will make is, I think funds like the PPP have helped us out quite a bit. We were able to bring our staff back. So at the current time, we have the equivalent of 7.5 full-time equivalents working for the business. We did lose some staff for personal reasons and concern over their health. They decided not to return. But it has been a challenging period. We are confident that we'll eventually bring the business to profitability. It's a question of how long that will take, but we're looking forward to better times in the summer of this year and beyond. Thank you.
Senator Gannon, unfortunately, Senator French has lost power, so he asked me to tell you to take over.
Okay, time to have a coup. Sounds good. Anyone have any questions on the panel? No, thanks for your input, Pat. If you're still there, Pat Kelly.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, who do we have next, Cameron?
Okay, I got an email. I believe this user is John Daniels. Give me 1 second to bring him in. John, could you unmute yourself?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, John. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's John Daniels. I'm one of the chef owners of Stock in Dover, New Hampshire. We're a very small chef-owned restaurant, casual fine dining, and we opened our doors the last week of January in 2020. Right away, we saw a real connection with the community. We had lines out the door for about 2 hours on Friday and Saturday nights. So the need was there for what we were providing. And we had to close our doors in March 16th, and we closed them for a few months until June, just because we're so small. We have 50 seats when we are packed. Like, the servers are shimmying the food over people's heads to get by, and that's not the climate people were looking for at the time. So we saw that decrease, and when we could have outdoor seating, we opened back up, and we were immediately welcomed again by the community. And then when it got cold again, we lost about 60-70% of our business revenue, just because it was so small in there. We can have 19 tables, or not 19 tables, 19 customers in there at a time with the 6 feet regulations, and we're very long, narrow restaurant, so it's kind of hard to wiggle that around. And then for the winter, we've cut down to 1 employee. We've just been doing takeout with the other owner and myself. Have been doing it, so 3 people total, just to pay bills, really. And it's just frustrating to us that we weren't included in the bill to allow us to get the funding, just because of our time we were open. There's not much we could do about that. We didn't know about it. There's not much you could do for customer confidence. If you're at a small place, or you can't really change that. If you have a large place, you can spread out a little bit more, but unfortunately we just can't do that, and we never planned on having a big place. Our whole thing was being comfortable and being really cozy, which is not what anyone's wanted at all this whole pandemic. But as far as the restaurants going out of business sort of thing, we we were a little quicker than most people. We had formed our business in, I believe it was July of 2019, and by October we had a space. But part of that is just from our experience. The other chef has about 10 years of being an executive chef all throughout Portsmouth. And the space we were actually in was one of the restaurant owners had offered it to us since he was moving out of that space. His name was Jay McSherry, so he's a well-known restaurant entrepreneur in Portsmouth. He owns, I think, probably around 10 restaurants and different establishments. So we do have the experience. I've been in the industry for probably 15 years now, and we're not close to being out of business. We saw the writing on the wall when we didn't get enough PPP funding because they spread out all of January, February, March. They took that 3 months because we didn't have any of 2019. And then they divided that up, even though we only had 7 weeks and 8 weeks of no payroll. They said it was 12 weeks total. So we saw a lot of that happening. So we made the decision not to pay ourselves really for 2019, which has allowed us, or 2020, which has allowed us to survive basically this whole time. We've each paid ourselves $15,000 for about 80 hours of work each week for the whole year. And that's just not sustainable. And it's just unfair that small businesses and small new businesses weren't thought of the way other businesses were. I guess a lot of the other things have mirrored what I've thought, so I don't want to go too long on mine. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? No, thank you for your call. We appreciate your testimony, sir. Thank you. Okay, Cameron, who do we have next?
The next person on my list is Kevin Dwyer. Kevin, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Dwyer. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kevin Dwyer. I opened up Dwyer's Pub in Portsmouth on December 6th of 2019. Want to thank you guys for your time and consideration for this bill. Definitely want to thank Perkins Coie as well. Like I said, I think everybody's pretty much covered everything up to this point. We're in a very similar position to Stock in Dover. We're a little restaurant and pub that is very narrow, designed in a way that is not doesn't lend itself to COVID seating. But we got very lucky with outdoor and were able to get to this point. I would say in terms of it's been nationally discussed, I think, how the trend in our industry is that a lot of the mom and pops are going out of business across the country, while larger corporations are succeeding and literally taking up spots of the mom and pops in a lot of cases. I think everybody's seen that in Portsmouth since COVID started. So I think the smaller mom and pops are in a more vulnerable position, but the fact that we've made it this far is, I think, a testament to the fact that we're not going to be going out of business. I speak on behalf of mine in particular. And it's all kind of to scale, like restaurants are notoriously low margin and kind of, it's a tough industry, but we were in a vulnerable position in the same way that a lot of the larger businesses that were able to get funding were. And I think we're in just as much of a need of relief funding as they were, but I understand the worry that we could go out of business. But like I said, I think everybody else has covered everything. I appreciate your guys' time.
Kevin, thanks for running your business, and we appreciate your time. Does anyone on the committee have a question for Kevin? Kevin, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, Cameron, who do we got next?
The last person I have signed up to speak is Valerie Roshan. Valerie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Valerie, for your call.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Vice Chair Gannon and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. I have to say, listening to the stories that we've just heard from our local business community, two from Portsmouth, are heartbreaking, and they've been the same stories we've been hearing for the last year. So I'm glad that they are able to tell you right from the horse's mouth, if you will, about the struggles that they've been having and the needs that they have. So my name is Valerie Roshan. I'm the president of the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. We represent close to 800 businesses in the Greater Portsmouth area. Small businesses of less than 10 employees comprise 80% of our membership. I'm here to testify in support of SB 107, relative to financial assistance for businesses affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The intentions of the Main Street Relief Fund allocated from the CARES Act funds were good, and that the need for financial support necessary to shore up our businesses was recognized and action taken. However, some of our small businesses who desperately needed and still need, as you've heard, the financial support provided to others have been left to fend for themselves. SB 107 proposes that entrepreneurs who started businesses shortly before and during the pandemic, and those who purchased pre-existing businesses during the same period, will be eligible for federal relief funds. There is nothing more Main Street than our locally owned, small entrepreneurial businesses who employ our local residents. Those who started businesses during this time agonized over business plans and financial projections, which were sufficient in most cases to bring to the banks to get the funds for their startups. Why then would they not also be accommodated in the Main Street Fund program? What of new owners who purchased existing businesses with years of financial data? You heard that from Liz. They have proven track records of successful revenue generation and net profits, yet they are also denied access to these critical funds. And yes, there was an appeals process, which was difficult, if not impossible to navigate, with business owners frustrated in their attempts to speak with a real human being. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, the committee, members of the Senate Commerce Committee, I urge you not to let these small businesses, who are the backbone of our communities and our economy, fall by the wayside yet again when new relief packages are funded. Please vote to pass SB 107. Thank you, and respectfully, Valerie Roshan from the Chamber Collaborative.
Ms. Roshan, it's Senator Gannon. Just to follow up on my earlier questions of other people, and I understand with shops and restaurants with years of financial data, totally understand they're a safer bet. With a new restaurant, as was said, with an 80% failure rate just off the top, now they're already struggling. I'm worried about putting good money into very risky, and I appreciate that they're there. I appreciate the jobs they're doing, but it's taxpayer money, and I'm afraid with an 80% failure rate multiplied by they're already struggling, and we don't even know who's going to go out to eat. Are we sending taxpayer money because of our heartstrings and not because we're looking at data?
I think that's a very fair question, Senator. It's a good one, and it's one that needs to be addressed, certainly. I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. One is I am incredibly optimistic about the upcoming season. I think with vaccinations, with the numbers that we're watching of positivity rates and hospitalizations going down, I honestly believe we're going to see a tsunami in New Hampshire of visitation, because people are looking not to go to big cities. They're not going to New York City. They're not even going to Boston. They are getting out and about to the country. New Hampshire is positioned perfectly to welcome these folks. So I think, first of all, we're going to see, the foot traffic that Liz was talking about, the creativity that Kevin Dwyer has shown in making his business successful in this time. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We opened up for outside business for our restaurants yesterday. The Jersey barriers will drop on the streets on April 1st to recreate our European outdoor dining experience here in Portsmouth. So I think, first of all, the opportunities are there. Secondly, I think that there are ways to get to yes. Do you provide the entire amount of the eligible loan amount right up front, or do you do you find a way to allocate that quarterly? Obligate it, but don't allocate it. Do you require some revenue projections and reports that show goal achievements? So right now, I know that there are some businesses who received, and correct me if I'm wrong, it might not be the Main Street funds, but during one of the funding programs, I think it was for actually sole proprietorships that made projections about their losses and now must go back and show the records to show those losses or their profits. And we'll have to refund some of those dollars. That's a hard pill to swallow. So if they're obligated but not allocated, that might be a way to get to yes. There needs to be some way that we can get to yes for these small businesses. There are smarter financial people than I am who could figure that out, but there are ways.
Thank you. I share your optimism. I look forward to being next to you at a table in Portsmouth this summer. Does
Awesome.
anyone else
Thank
on
you.
the committee have a question? No, it doesn't seem to be. Thank you, Ms. Rochon. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Gannon, that is everyone, I believe, who signed up to speak. If there's anyone who would like to speak who didn't sign up, you can raise your hand on Zoom, and we have one hand. Let me see here. Okay. Anna, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Anna, oh, we get to see you too. Great.
Oh, I had no idea.
Less Zoomy. It's good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
for coming
Thank
today.
you so much for hearing me. I'm working alone in my shop. I hope nobody comes. I own Anna Chocolate. It's a small chocolate factory. We actually started about 4 years ago as a home-based business. I started it in my kitchen. It's a true bootstrap operation. We're built on blood, sweat, and tears, and no, or at least very minimal financial investment and some credit card debt. I moved out of my home kitchen about 2 years ago, and my husband and I built a factory in Epping. And during this time, the last 2+ years, we invested everything back into the business. It was never going to be possible to turn a profit while we were in Epping, but that is the time that we used to build a foundation for the success of our business, with the plans to eventually move to a larger space. In January of 2020, I found a space in Exeter.
You froze. We can't hear you. But oh no, you're back. No, you're not. We'll give you a second here. Senator French, Anna, a chocolatier, is testifying in Epping, but she has frozen. Okay, you disappeared for a minute there. Oh, you're back. Good.
Am I
Go
back?
ahead.
Okay.
Yep. You had moved from Epping to Exeter, I believe.
To Exeter. So we got the keys on March 1st, and 2 weeks into our build out, everything was shut down. My husband and I decided to proceed with our move because we needed to grow. So we did all of the work ourselves. We had friends who were going to help us with the build out. They weren't able to help us because of the isolation requirements. Everyone wanted to be safe. So we finally were able to open in August. We've added 5 employees, and I've finally, for the first time, been able to pay myself a regular salary. And I wanted to share this because the current guidelines for all of the funding opportunities do not take into account
And no, we lost you. We've lost your volume, but hopefully you'll be back in a second.
but because of that, we've failed for Main Street and other funding
We
opportunities.
lost you about a minute ago, Anna. If you want to just go back a little bit, then go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Gosh, that's frustrating.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. I lost my place. We grossed more in each quarter of 2020 than we did in 2019. So therefore, we don't qualify for a lot of these funding opportunities. And I just want to draw attention to what I think is the need to consider overhead, increases in overhead in 2020, increases in wages, 5, essentially 6 if you count my own salary, which is thankfully happening for the first time ever. Those are new jobs that we've created in New Hampshire, and it feels ironic and like a slap to a small business owner that these jobs are not valued in the funding consideration to this point. So that's the main thing I wanted to draw attention to, that and the cost of expansion, the cost of our investment in growing the business. The funding guidelines don't seem to take into account businesses that are in this growth phase. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Anna, we value your jobs that you've created, and my wife and 3 daughters will look forward to trying out your Exeter chocolates.
Please do visit. Thank you.
Senator French, you're back in charge. Anyone else on the committee have any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony today, Anna. Have a great day.
And thank you, Senator Gannon. Canterbury's out of power. I'm now in Concord.
Okay.
Cameron, do we have any other speakers?
Senator French, that is everyone who signed up, and I believe that's all the hands that have been raised. I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
Could you recap everything I missed? Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 107. And we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 126 FN. Do we have the sponsor?
We do. Senator Perkins Quokka, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Good morning again, committee.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from Senate District 21, representing the city of Portsmouth and the towns of Madbury, Lee, Durham, Newington, Newmarket, and Newfields. I am the prime sponsor of SB 126 FN, adopting omnibus legislation on landlord-tenant proceedings. I'm also the prime sponsor of parts 1 and 2 of SB 126. LSR 210873 relative to a notice to quit for residential tenants, and LSR 210878 relative to prohibiting certain denials of rental assistance. In addition to the bill itself, I also want to introduce a very important amendment to this bill, 0324S, which replaces the entire text of the bill to make some important changes responsive to feedback I have been receiving on the bill in the interim. Part 1 is the section I am receiving the most feedback on. Part 1 is intended to provide some extra protection to tenants, given the high prevalence of COVID-related job loss in our state. Under statutes, tenants have a 7-day notice period for non-payment. After this 7-day period, landlords often, as a practice, do commence eviction proceedings if they deem the circumstances to warrant it, simply due to the amount of time it does take to proceed with an eviction. The original text of the bill extended the 7-day period to 30 days to provide some extra time for people to stay housed and to try and come up with rent. Instead, as I am now proposing to amend it, the bill allows the tenant simply to make payment up to the date of the eviction hearing. It makes sense for landlords to keep tenants who can pay, and I think any landlord here today or otherwise would tell you they agree. It is extraordinary situations which cause us to look at ways we can make some small tweaks to give each other a little extra room to each do the best we can. And in this case, I am simply proposing to extend the date for payment from the 7-day cure period to the date of the eviction hearing itself. This does not extend the time for the eviction overall. Mr. Chairman, I can proceed to introduce part 2, but I did just want to pause to see if you wanted me to take any questions on that.
Any questions from the committee? Nope, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Moving to part 2. Part 2 enables residents to apply for and receive rental assistance prior to an eviction notice being issued. This would allow people to receive help before an eviction process begins. I believe this portion of the bill is one that is supported by landlords and tenants alike. Often tenants, when applying for assistance, adding an inspection by the municipality is an extra step prior to tenants receiving such assistance, which in turn allows them to pay rent. In an ideal world, such inspection would always be a check the box requirement, but in cases where repairs are required by the landlord, for example, he or she may need time to decide whether to make such investment, and the tenant is left without control over the situation, without aid, and potentially without housing. Of course, we want all tenants to have housing and ideally all tenants to have excellent housing, but given New Hampshire's incredibly tight housing market and housing crisis, I think we need to acknowledge again that there are places in our processes where we can have a little extra room for people to stay in their homes. I'd also just like to point out that on both parts of this bill, we've had overwhelming sign-ins in support of both Part 1 and 2 as amended. And though there's some opposition, I'd be happy to address that through amendment or further language changes that we can work out together. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to present SB 126 Parts 1 and 2. I'll be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, and then the prime sponsor of the remaining part, Senator Bertzel. Senator Bertzel, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Regina Bertzel, State Senator for District 19, which encompasses the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Windham. And I am the prime sponsor of Part 3 of Senate Bill 126. This bill was brought to me requested by the Commission for the Humane Rights. And in essence, it mirrors what the language and definitions are in the HUD regulations. There is, I think you have in your hands an amendment that the Commission had asked me to put in. They did a few tweaks, and there actually may be a few more coming, but I think this is the gist of it. The Commission currently processes housing discrimination cases. However, the language changes are required in order to get reimbursed from HUD for this work. Just for a little bit of background, the state of New Hampshire had an agreement, but around the change of the HUD language, we actually lost that agreement. So generally, it replaces or updates the Fair Housing section of New Hampshire laws of discrimination, which is RSA 354-A:8 through 15. And in essence, what it does is Section 9 adds definitions. Section 10 expands the civil rights violations and real estate transactions. 11 goes into detail on some civil rights violation for the disabled. In the amendment, 12 will be taken out. 13, civil rights violation, blockbusting, which is defined in there. Section 14 will be taken out, and 15 covers exemptions. However, as you can see, there will be some changes in the amendment to I believe they're going to be taken out Roman numbers 6, 9, and 11. And we do have the executive director of the Commission for Human Rights, and she'll go into a lot more detail about the bill and why it's needed. So with that, I will entertain any questions that I can answer.
Thank you, Senator. So I don't have the amendment right before me at this time. Section 14 came out completely?
I believe so. Ani Malachi will kind of go, she'll go through some of the changes, but I believe Marie emailed everyone a copy of the amendment, or sent it to Aaron anyway.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, because this is an omnibus, Senator, do you want to go part by part?
Yes, that'd be great. Anyone for Part 1?
Please raise your hand. You can do that on Zoom with the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, you can dial *9. The first person I see is Jeff Keeler. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Go ahead, Jeff.
Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will be speaking on part 1 and part 3 later. I am a realtor from Epsom, New Hampshire, longtime member of the Public Policy Committee, and I'm speaking on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. We are strongly opposed to the change proposed in part 1, which would eliminate 540:2-A, which is failure to pay rent. Currently, the language allows a landlord to start the eviction process after 7 days. The proposal is to extend it to 30. I'd like to share with you personal experience. I bought a 24-unit apartment complex 2 years ago, and we have found that some of the tenants who were experiencing issues relative COVID contacted us. We worked with them to work out payment plans and reduce rent until they can catch up. Those are working out great. We've had other tenants who got behind and disappeared in the middle of the night, leaving us several months behind with little or no chance of ever recapturing that money. In general, the practice, what happens is once you start the process, if you give a notice to evict after the week, the tenant has the right to appeal. If they're unsuccessful in the appeal, they can then appeal to the court for a subsequent hearing. If the judgment is in the landlord's favor at that point, you then have to schedule an eviction with a sheriff. The whole process at best takes 2 months, more typically 3 months. So we're looking, even under the current 7-day, landlords who are experiencing these types of situations are typically losing 2 to 3 months rent. While you can go after a tenant in small claims court, the fiscal reality is that it's very unproductive because you hire an attorney, you get a judgment, the judge says that they need to pay $20 or $30 a month, and that stops after a few months, and the idea of chasing them with a lawyer again is very unfruitful. So we are strongly opposed to that change and believe that the current system allows more than adequate time for tenants to state their case, catch up if they're able, or work out a payment plan with the landlord. But we have to recognize that during these times, the landlords are suffering greatly, and the mortgage companies are still saying they want to get paid. Well, they may not be receiving money from the tenants. So happy to answer any questions if the committee members have any.
Yes, Senator Susie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Keeler, I don't know if you heard Senator Perkins-Coa's testimony at the beginning, but she was offering an amendment to change section 1 to delete all of the portions of the bill and replace it with the provision that would just allow the tenant to make the payment up to the date of eviction. So it wouldn't change the date of eviction, but just allow for payment up to that point. I wondered if you could comment on that.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Senator, you're suggesting that the tenant might work out a payment plan with the landlord. Would this be while they remained in the unit, or would it be after they had left?
It appears from the amendment, let's see, they would still be in the unit. As best I can tell, I am just looking at the amended language and not at the whole statute. So this would allow for payment after notice. And once again, would not in any way change the date of the eviction process, but would just allow for payment right up until the date of eviction.
Okay. And to that end, Senator, the current law, as I understand it, is that a tenant has the right and ability to catch up on past rent at any time. And if they do so, they can't be evicted for failure to pay unless they have done it 3 or more times in a 12-month period, in which case the landlord could then follow through with the eviction. But the current law does allow for a tenant to catch up. And I can tell you from personal, a tenant who comes to us and says, hey, I'm having trouble, can we plan, it would be foolish to lose a good tenant who's willing to work with you. More typically, what we're getting is people saying, well, I can't pay because I've got COVID. And then 3 or 4 months later, you see a moving truck appeared and they're gone, and you have little or no ability to collect your back rent. So I don't think it's a change that's necessary. And I think the fix here is intended for a short-term problem, given the amount of COVID vaccines and so forth, which seem to be changing the bell curve. And hopefully this is going to be in our rearview mirror shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Keeler.
Thank you,
Any
Senator.
other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Keeler.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Senator French, would it be helpful if I shared the amendment on the screen just so everyone can see it, or do you want to continue with testimony?
Sure, why don't you?
Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that? All right, I'll just leave it up for a minute and then go back to testimony because I can't do both.
Looks good.
Okay, the next hand I have raised is Nick Norman. Nick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I believe I'm unmuted now, yes?
Yes, you are. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak. Get to my notes here. So we're only talking about part one, am I correct?
At this moment, yeah.
Okay, great. So the original bill, so first of all, by way of introduction, I lead the legislative initiative for landlord-tenant law that goes to about a readership of 4,000 landlords across the state. And I'm also the government chair for the Apartment Association of New Hampshire. So I'm bringing to you a composite response from many, many landlords. Plus, I've been managing real estate for about 30 years and managed 48 units of my own. So the original bill, we would be vehemently, strongly against. The amendment that has been offered, we would be neutral about. So I want to say that in an eviction for non-payment, with a 7-day notice, it does take about 2 to 3 months before you finalize an eviction and someone is placed out of the home. During that time, in present law, there are many, many remedies that a tenant can utilize to keep their home. And every landlord, myself and anyone that I know, if a tenant's coming to us, just like your previous speaker said, and wants to work out a payment plan, it's the smartest thing for us to do business-wise and in human-wise to work out a payment plan with that tenant and keep them in the apartment. It only makes good business sense. In present law, we can already work out payment plans that can go to the court and stay the eviction. Those payment plans can last for a year, 2 years, 3 years. It can be anything that creatively works for the tenant and the landlord. To add another 23 days of lost rent on a bad tenant is just unconscionable. So we would be strongly against that because the present law has been in place for, well, since before 1978. It works totally fine. Many avenues for a tenant to work out payment plans with a property owner. And the only time that would really come into place of not being able to work something out is a bad tenant that's not making payments, not establishing payment plans. And I can tell you, a very common experience in my experience and all the landlords I hear from what the previous owner spoke to. Bad tenant gets behind. They are several months behind, and then they just move out and you never collect your money. So to increase the loss of the landlord by yet another 23 days is just, I think, ridiculous. What would happen if this original bill goes through? is you're increasing greatly the risk for property owners. The response is going to have to be that they're going to have to raise rents to cover that additional loss. Think about it, a rent that's $1,500 a month, 3 months, $4,500, 12 months, $375 a month that would have to be raised, spread across other tenants. The other thing that would absolutely happen, and by increasing that risk with landlords, is landlords would have to raise their standards on qualifications of someone affording an apartment, being qualified for an apartment. So all of a sudden, you're going to see more people that don't qualify for rentals because the landlord just can't take that additional risk. So it would actually increase homelessness, and it would worsen the affordability of housing. There's more to talk about in the other parts, but we'll wait for that later. I'm very happy to take questions and encourage questions.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Maybe you can help me. Did you see the amendment?
I have, and I can speak to that very much.
Does it change anything?
It does change things.
Okay, could you tell me what it changes?
So the amendment with present law, a tenant has 7 days to pay the amount of money that's on the demand for rent. If they pay that $7 by the end of the 7 days, then the eviction is nulled. But the tenant only gets to do that 3 times in a 12-month period. With the amendment, the tenant would be able to pay not only the demand for rent amount, but any other lawful charges that became due, including the next week or the next month's rent as it became due, or any other costs that were associated that were a loss to the landlord that are lawful in the lease. That's very, very fair because it allows the tenant time up to the hearing to catch up on everything. And the best way to say that is to make the landlord whole. In present law, the tenant would only need to pay the demand for rent money by the 7 days, but not additional rent, other costs, and so forth. They would not be required to make the landlord whole. With the amendment, they would be required to make the landlord whole to defeat the eviction. And we see that as a good philosophical process. In other words, for the tenant to win, they have to make the landlord good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, the next hand I have is Jessica Margson. Jessica, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Margison. I'm a volunteer with Granite State Organizing Project. I do housing advocacy in the city of Manchester, New Hampshire, where I also reside. So this one's very important to me to speak in support of it. Every court action that a tenant is brought up on is negative. It reflects poorly on them, regardless of the case outcome. So if they're taken to court 3 times, they defeat it, the next landlord they applied to is going to see those 3 times. They then have to defend themselves yet again to say, well, I paid them all off. This will help avoid extra court hearings, and it will actually help to avoid some homeless situations. I recently helped a family of 4, a mother and father with a family of 4, that didn't have the time to get into an organization that could help them. I was calling CAP agencies, our mayor, and everything. But the way the CARES Act money works in the organizations is first come, first serve. There's no triage on are they going to be locked out tomorrow or next week. It's first come, first serve. Giving them any extra time to get the funds applied for and received will help avoid extra court cases, which our courts are already full. It will help avoid some families hitting homelessness. The families that are spoken of by this landlord there's always a few bad apples in every bunch. If someone's going to skip out in the middle of the night, they're going to skip out in the middle of the night. The people seeking help are not going to do that. They need that extra time. They're kind of in the middle with all the forces around them, and they can only do so much. So opening up that time period will give them more opportunity to apply for help, get things in place should they not be able to get the help to get into a home and leave properly. Thus, the landlord will be able to track where this tenant is for down the road if need be, instead of them disappearing if they have more time to work through it. And it's going to avoid extra court actions. I see the only person that's hurting is a highly litigious landlord, who this would equal up the playing field for them. So I fully am in support of this.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron?
Okay, the last hand that I see raised is Elliot Berry. Elliot, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Elliot Berry. I'm the Director of Housing Justice at New Hampshire Legal Assistance. I've been representing tenants for 44 years, and I can't even estimate how many eviction proceedings I've been involved in. I want to, again, just address the amendment. I agree that as originally submitted, the bill should not go forward, but the amendment is just pure common sense. It takes what not right now, as Mr. Norman explained, the tenant has a right to pay and stay until a 7-day eviction notice expires. What all the bill does in part 1 as amended is extend that right to pay and stay until the time of the court hearing. It would if the tenant comes up with all the money that he or she owes, including the landlord's court costs, that is the filing fee and the sheriff's fees, then the eviction goes away. So it doesn't add a single second to the eviction process, right? Which is why I think Mr. Norman's association is neutral on it. One thing that is of incredible importance to understand, New Hampshire is now the recipient of $200 million from the federal government to help tenants pay rent that they weren't able to pay because directly or indirectly because of COVID. It is going to take about, I think, a minimum of 30 days for tenants to work through that application process and get a decision. This bill, if passed, will enable the tenant and the administrators of a complicated program to take the time they need to get the money to fully reimburse the landlord. It's a win-win. And by the way, under current law, because of the 7-day limit on the right to cure the eviction, it puts enormous pressure on your local welfare administrators, which right now is the last resort for tenants who can't pay their rent. And it puts enormous pressure on them to make decisions very quickly. And this way they'll be able to refer people to the federal emergency rental relief program and just let them in a more deliberate manner make decisions on applications for emergency rental assistance. No downside. I urge you to pass it. Could I also, I have a deposition in 10 minutes, and could I just briefly address part 2, if I could?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. What I want to say about part 2 is a couple of things. Number one, this was already passed by the Senate in the last session, but because it was part of an omnibus bill, that parts of which the governor didn't like, he vetoed it. But I don't think the veto had a single thing to do with the local welfare provision. The other thing that's a little confusing, though, under the amendment, which I strongly support, Amendment 0324, the part about welfare being denied because of a landlord not an apartment not passing inspection, that part has been deleted by the amendment. And the only thing that's left is to clarify the current practice that by most welfare administrators, but unfortunately not all, that a tenant doesn't have to come to the welfare office with an eviction notice before they can get rental assistance. This is really important because you don't want the relationship between landlord and tenant to deteriorate. You want the landlord to get the assistance when close to the time that the rent is due. That's how most administrators do it. I don't think there's any controversy about that at all. So again, I thank you for your time, and I just urge you to pass the amendment. It's win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Berry. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator French, we've had one more hand for part one, Alyssa Margolin.
Okay.
Alyssa, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Alyssa Margolin. I serve as Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide coalition of 80 organizations united around affordable housing policy and ending homelessness in New Hampshire. Our members are those who develop, manage, finance affordable housing, homeless service providers, supportive housing providers, and family and children's advocates. We are here to express our support for the amendment as proposed for Part 1 of Senate Bill 126. Most of the members of Housing Action New Hampshire are indeed landlords. We have a little litmus test that we use to decide whether or not to support landlord-tenant policy. We call it the fair and functional test. And as Mr. Norman noted, we viewed the amendment as proposed to create fairness and improve the function of the exchange of renters to landlords during this challenging time. I do want to bring to the attention of the committee that Moody's Analytics, a well-respected economic research firm, released a paper in January of this year and rated the states. Unfortunately, our state, New Hampshire, was listed at the most at risk of an evictions crisis. But as Mr. Berry noted, we do have quite a substantial new rental assistance program that will soon be launched by New Hampshire Housing through the CAP agencies. Applications start on March 15th. We think that it makes good sense for housing stabilization and good sense for making landlords whole to allow a tenant the right to cure in full, including fees up until the date of the eviction hearing, and urge your support for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. So Cameron, anyone else who wants to speak on 2 or 3, let's take them all in now.
Okay, anyone who wants to speak on parts 2 or 3, if you could raise your hand with the raise hand function on Zoom, or dial *9 if you're on the phone. Okay, Nick Norman. Nick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Okay, related to part 2, this is really simple. The original bill had 2 sections in there. Elliot Berry spoke to each. The first one is to make it that a assistance program could not deny assistance if the property was in some form of substandard housing compliance. Personally, I've never, ever seen that come up in rental assistance in my 30 years of managing. I don't know what it's about. I don't know even why it's needed. The amendment takes that part out. Seems inconsequential to me because I just have never seen such a thing. The second part of part 2 would make it that a agency giving rental assistance could not deny the assistance if the tenant did not already have an eviction notice. We did a study on this last year when this idea was coming through. And it turns out that some welfare departments have that restriction. Some welfare departments don't have that restriction. So it becomes a policy of the individual welfare department as to whether they require an eviction notice or not. We think it's a good idea and would support this amendment in part 2, because we don't see any reason why a welfare department should require an eviction notice just to initiate getting support for a tenant to save them from getting an eviction notice. It doesn't make any sense. So some welfare departments are requiring that, which means tenants are getting eviction notices when they really don't need them. It's more eviction notices, out in the world. So we would support that. At the same time, it's not needed because some welfare departments don't do that policy anyway. So it's really up to each individual welfare department, but having it codified that they could not have that restriction is probably a good idea. We've had many times where I've told a tenant, you're going to need an eviction notice to get assistance from the welfare department, so here I'm giving you one. And the response from the tenant is usually, thank you, which seems silly. Here's a landlord giving an eviction notice and say, oh, thank you very much. But that's the current reality. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee members?
Jeff, it's Todd Shannon, thanks, Gary. Just want to let you know I'm waiting for a couple of cars to come in.
All set. Thank you, Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
Cameron?
Okay, the only other hand that I have raised at this time for either parts 2 or 3 is Ani Malachi. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. Great. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to speak today. As previously stated, my name is Ani Malachi, and I am the Executive Director of the Commission for Human Rights. Relative to the information that Senator Birdsell shared earlier, we, the commission, asked for assistance in creating the legislation to move forward the statutory changes that the commission would need to come into alignment with the Federal Fair Housing Act. Just a little bit of history, and I won't belabor this. I know we've been at this for a while this morning. The commission created in 1965, and the commission's sole responsibility is the enforcement of the New Hampshire laws against discrimination. The commission covers by state statute areas of employment, public accommodation, housing, and education was added to our statute, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2019, K through 12 education. With that being said, I believe it was around 2000 when HUD updated their rules and their statute, which a lot of states fell out of line with HUD. And so they went through this same process that we are doing now to update their state statute so that they would achieve something that's called substantial equivalence and to be able to resubmit with HUD to obtain or reobtain their work share agreement. And so that is the process that we're going through now. There have been several attempts over the past 20 years to do this, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. I've only been with the commission almost 3 years, so the information that I have about past attempts come some from my conversations with HUD, and some of it in finding documents. I believe Rogers Johnson did legislation back in 2006. And I believe Senator Carson put forth some legislation as well. I apologize for not knowing the year. So neither attempt was successful, unfortunately. In my more recent meeting with HUD, one of the things that was stated was that New Hampshire is the only state east of the Mississippi River that does not have a HUD contract. So not something that we are proud of, and certainly not saying that you have to jump into something because everyone else has one and you want to also be with the cool kids. But what these changes would allow is for us to be reimbursed for the work that we are currently doing. We We also, and I know this is a little off topic, but we do have a work share agreement in a similar form with the EEOC, and that assists in reimbursing us for the work that we do relative to employment discrimination cases. And so HUD, a work share agreement with them would allow for the same. The reason that we need to make these changes, there are some things that we just don't line up with. Some of it is the timeline, some of it is how cases are processed. Some of it is in dealing with how cases go to court. So it's not huge changes, but the changes would allow us to move forward and to be, again, the phrase is substantially equivalent with the Federal Fair Housing Act. So I'll put a pin in it there. I am happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And thank you very much for your time.
Senator Susie.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading my lips.
Thank you. Just one quick question regarding the amendment that was mentioned earlier. I wondered if you could just review briefly what the changes are that are proposed in the amendment.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. The moment I stopped talking, I went, I forgot to talk about the amendment. So perfect timing. We are in sync. Cameron, I saw your hand. You wanted to jump in?
Do you want me to put it on? It's 11 pages long. Do you want me to put it up on the screen or?
Well, no. I think if I just talk about the specifics, so me being new to the process, that's the entire section 3. And with the changes included in the amendment, and I can just go down the list and talk about the specific handful of areas where those changes are. Maybe that's easier for everyone.
That'd be great.
Although Cameron's idea is an amazing one, if it makes it easier, I'll just run down the list. So these changes were, I met with, let's see, Adam Schmidt and with Bob Quinn from the New Hampshire Realtors Association, and then also Elliot Berry, whom you've already heard give testimony, and I met as well to just go over the totality of the legislation and then to see what changes needed to be made. And also, as Senator Birdsell mentioned, HUD also has a copy of it, and there are a few tweaks, and these are small language tweaks. It's not, taking out whole sections or changing things whole cloth. So these would be very small tweaks. To go back to Senator Susie's question, in 354-A, section 10, Roman numeral 6, familial status, there was some language that was a bit clunky, and that's what most of this is. The language is a little clunky. So in the amendment, the language is fixed. I believe the change there was that the protected classes were not listed. And if you look at our original, if you look at our current statute, it's listed there. So the amendment puts the protected classes back in. And that was a concern for the realtors because the way the language read, it was a little too vague. So that was an easy fix. Section 12, so 354-A:12, that whole section will be struck. And that section, let me try to get down to it. On the original copy that you have, that section is called unlawful activity. And again, clunky language. So the difficulty in that section was as it relates to arrest records. The reason that it's being taken out, it's not that the commission feels that it's not appropriate necessarily to have coverage for people with arrest records as such, but the problem is that it needs more community input, that it was inadvertently added, and that is on me. So we can have that worthy conversation, but we need to have it something that's open to the public so that all sides can weigh in and we can have that debate. It would not be fair or reasonable for it to be enacted in such a way without that public dialogue. So that is why I made the decision to go ahead and take it out. Section 14, if you look back at your original document, that one is called refusal to sell or rent because with the guide dogs hearing and support animals. That one also, same thing. There's a lot of debate and confusion around support animals, service animals, and it still needs to be very reflective of what HUD has in process. So the language really needs to be as close to what HUD has as possible. I got some out-of-state assistance, let's just put it that way, on helping to construct this. I'm very new to the building a bill process. And so this inadvertently, unfortunately, again, was put in. Now, the commission, if we want to add something to our statute relative to that, again, this having it removed is not at all stating that it's not worthy to be in. What it is saying is that, again, we need to have more community input, more public dialogue, and what we've customarily been doing with these situations. If they come to the commission, for example, we look at the guidance that HUD has already provided. We look within our statute, we look at the cases that we've already adjudicated, and we move forward with making those decisions from there, which is basically how HUD would do the work as well. And then the last section is going to be 354-A15, section B, and that's in the original document. And under B, Roman numeral 6, which is restricting the rental of rooms in a housing accommodation persons of one sex. So that one could be a little confusing because what we don't want to do is create a situation where, let's say, it's a family or single mom, single dad, they have 2 children and the children are of opposite sex. They can afford to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, but they cannot afford to rent a 3-bedroom apartment. And so if we included this, we would inadvertently will not allow the brother and sister to cohabitate. New Hampshire doesn't have a law against opposite sex children sharing a room. And so we don't want to be more restrictive or restrain the opportunity for people to have an affordable housing. So that's why that section is coming out. Then we move down to Roman numeral 9. And that one, it starts off the owner of an owner-occupied residential building with 4 or fewer units. And it goes on. The language there is super clunky, and we don't need that because we already cover people as a protected class. We cover sexual orientation and gender identity, so that makes it confusing. So for clarity, that number 9 needs to come out. And then moving a little further down, and this is the last one, and thank you so much for your patience. Section 11, where it talks about refusal, and this again is back in the original, refusal of a child sex offender who owns a residence and resides at a residential real estate, et cetera, et cetera. Not that that's not an important safety tip or something that should take place, but there's 2 situations there. Number 1, again, this would be something that we should have more community input if we wanted to add this section. Number 2, in speaking with the Realtors Association, as well as Mr. Barry, who's done this work, as he's already stated, for many decades, the likelihood of something like that happening is slim to none. And what I would end up doing inadvertently is making sex offenders a protected class. So we don't want to add protected classes if we don't need to, if there's no wherewithal. And so as far as I know, even having anecdotal conversations, we've not had a situation like this occur. So I don't think it's something we need to step so far forward to protect or to stop a situation that hasn't happened. And to be very honest, if something like this were to happen, then what the landlord would simply say as their defense, if they were served a charge of discrimination for not renting to a person with children under 18, they would then be beholden to divulge their status. And then that would be a very reasonable reason to not rent to that individual. So we would not pursue a charge of discrimination against them. So with that being said, I hope I've answered all the questions, or at least spoken to the amendment. Oh, and one last thing, HUD is still continuing to look over the entire document. I have sent them the changes that I'm going to make, and they will respond back to let me know what additional language changes or any other changes. But looking at the email that I received from them yesterday, it looks like the changes are not really substantial. So it's more language, it's more finesse, so that things are very clear and put in the proper order. So thank you all very much. I know that was a lot to go over, but I appreciate your patience, and thank you, Senator Susie, for bringing that up. And I will happily answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee members? Nope, that covers it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, we've had several more hands raised. The first one is only identified at the phone number. If you could identify yourself for the record and unmute yourself first, and then identify yourself. If you're, there you go. Yep.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Senator French, Joe Haas here.
I knew it was. I could tell from the number.
I just have one brief comment. Is on Roman numeral number 3. It has the phrase chain of title. And I see the word title is in 3 times in this bill. And there's a multiple number 3s. I presume you see it, it says it is a civil rights violation. It starts off with, and then it ends with chain of title. And my brief comment is getting back to the woman that called in from the New Hampshire Human Rights Commission. There was a bill a few years ago put in by my friend and state rep Mike Brewster from Pittsfield, and he tried to put in civil liberties, and they showed up and didn't want to be burdened with more work over there because a lot of them are volunteers. That was their excuse. But I would like to have, please, would you put in there in the appropriate place, maybe whenever there's civil rights mentioned, that it also includes civil liberties. And I did send you an email with the website on that the 2 phrases are not the same, and the civil liberties one does include right to privacy and right, but not Fourth Amendment rights. And a name comes to mind of Neil Kirk. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you. Any
Thank you,
questions? Any questions? Thanks, Joe.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, the next hand I have is Jessica Margison.
Good morning again. Do I
Good
need
morning.
to state my name and everything again?
Pardon me?
I just was wondering if I needed to state my name and address and everything again, since I
Just
don't.
your name, please.
Thank you. Jessica Margison, volunteer with Granite State Organizing Project. Definitely in agreement with part 2. I have not come across anyone requiring the inspection done. The only time an inspection is done prior to any type of money being given to is when Section 8 is being applied, and they go in and they make sure they have a certificate of compliance with the city. Denying someone based on that also moves the powers of who's governing that. It's both, there's a municipality. If the city does not have a building department, they have some type of organization in the government to assist with the RSA 48A14 issues. But I am also in support of it. I just wanted to speak out on that.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Cameron?
Okay, next is Jeff Keeler. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Cameron. Jeff Keeler again speaking on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. Just wanted to state that NHAR fully supports the intent behind Part 3 of this bill. In fact, our Realtor Code of Ethics goes further than state statute in making our members responsible, excuse me, for their words and actions on social media and elsewhere, even if those actions were not directly related to a real estate transaction. We had some concerns regarding the language in the bill and needed clarification. We want to thank Ani Malachi for working with us. And while we haven't seen the final version of the amendment, the version that she submitted to us did satisfy those concerns. And we think that Part 3 should move forward.
Great, thank you. So you have not seen the final amendment to Part 3, correct?
Mrs. Senator, I'm not sure. We received something, and I say we, Bob Quinn and Adam Schmidt worked with her and received a version, and we're assuming that's the same version that is before you, but there may have been tweaks since that time, so I wouldn't want to say for sure that we have seen it.
Okay, so when you're sure you've seen it, which I think you probably have, but would you reach out back to this committee and just confirm what you just said about being happy with it all?
Absolutely, be happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's everyone looking to speak for a first time on these parts. I do have 2 hands wanting to speak again on these parts. We have Nick Norman, and then we have Ani Malachi again.
Take Nick.
Okay. Nick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I realized after I left, I never spoke about Part 3. So our response to that is fairly simple. It's huge and enormous. We're going through it line by line, comparing federal law to state law and looking at the impacts. We just need a little more time. I just ask a couple things that you not put out your committee recommendation just immediately yet. Give us another week or 2 if you can, so that we can study it. We've got an attorney that specializes in discrimination law reviewing it. Maybe we're halfway through. It's pretty enormous to go line by line, federal statute to state statute. The other is, could I get a copy of this amendment that is most recently from Annie? And I would like to be able to speak with Annie or be put in contact with her. Maybe she or you could give me her contact info, and I can be reached at 603-432-5549, nicknorman@yahoo.com. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Cameron, that'll be posted on the website shortly, won't it? Or is it there now?
Unfortunately, amendments aren't posted to the website. However, I will reach out to Mr. Norman. I'll send him the amendment.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And Mr. Norman, same as the other, once you've had a chance to review it thoroughly, would you reach back out to this committee members?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Senator Bradley, you have a question?
Senator Bradley, you're muted.
There you go.
There we go. Mr. Norman, could you just give us your phone number again? Thank you.
603-432-5549. Please call me anytime on anything landlord-tenant law.
Thank you.
No other questions? Thank you, Mr. Norman.
Okay, and then the last hand is Ani Malachi to speak again. You should be able to unmute yourself. Yep.
Great, thank you. Yes, I will certainly reach out to Mr. Norman and connect, and we can go through any questions that he or his organization might have. And to your question, Senator French, the the amendment that you have is also the amendment that the Realtors, Association of Realtors has. And so what I've been doing is keeping everybody up to speed. I did not have Mr. Norman's information previously, but I can absolutely include him in the email. And if there are any, whatever changes HUD is requiring, then that would go into, some form of an amendment as well. But I will keep everyone abreast at the same time with all the changes. But it looks like the HUD ones are very minor. So I'm hoping that, it'll go through easily. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that I was, although a lot of different avenues here, trying to keep everyone on the same page and having conversations as frequently as needed to make sure people feel comfortable with what we're doing. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator French, those are all of the hands on parts 2 or 3 of Senate Bill 126.
Very good. Let's I'll close this hearing on Senate Bill 126 FN. We won't be voting on this today. I'm going to hold it over for tomorrow's next week so we can get all the additional input. You guys set to go with the last bill, or do you want to take a quick break? Oh, we'll go with it then. I'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 160, and I believe the sponsor is here.
Yes, sir, I am.
There. I thought it was your bill, Senator. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro. Pleased to be the sponsor of Senate Bill 160. For anyone that was in the session, in the Senate in the last session, this is fairly familiar. We did pass a MIWA, a multiple employer welfare arrangement piece of legislation 2 years ago. There was some discussion as to whether it should be strengthened or not. This bill, as presented, offers those strengthening measures that were not included in the bill 2 years ago. That being said, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the committee re-refer this bill for study. I want to make it clear, because there have been some questions raised as to whether we're trying to undermine or change in any way the existing MIWAs. That is certainly not the intent, and I don't believe it's a correct reading of the bill. But in any case, I just want to make it clear that's not the intent. Some of the organizations that have MIWAs right now are the New Hampshire Motor Transport Association, New Hampshire Bankers Association, I believe the Auto Dealers Association. What I would like to do through the re-referral process is try to strengthen this law through the potential of allowing for a self-insured pilot program that would be consistent, obviously, with the MIWA law. I think there would be quite a bit of interest in that, but in order to make that happen, there needs to be a lot more time, negotiation back and forth with the various parties, the insurance companies, the Department of Insurance, and folks that are interested in that opportunity. So I would ask that the bill be re-referred, and that is the end of my testimony.
It was lovely in that. Thank you.
Lovely.
Any questions? Seeing none. Anyone to speak on this, Cameron?
Yes. First, we have DJ Betancourt from the Insurance Department. DJ, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me all right?
Barely.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is DJ Betancourt, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Insurance Department. As has been the long-standing policy of the department, I am here this morning not to take a position on Senate Bill 160, but rather to share a few thoughts for your consideration. My comments this morning will be based on the bill as presented. I understand from hearing Senator Bradley a moment ago that he'd like to go an alternative route with the bill, and that is absolutely his prerogative and the prerogative of the committee if you'd like to go in that direction. But as I said, I did want to share with you a few thoughts around not only this bill, but I think MEWA's overall as a concept. So as Senator Bradley mentioned, this legislation is almost identical to Senate Bill 227 from 2019. At that time, Senator Bradley worked with the insurance department and engaged in several months of stakeholder meetings to determine whether truly viable association health plans should be available in New Hampshire, and if so, how exactly they should be regulated. Much of that discussion was driven by a new rule put forward by the federal government that sought to promulgate through the United States Department of Labor a rule that would allow businesses or association entities that were not previously grouped together to join for the main purpose of buying insurance based on either a common interest or a geographical area, things of that nature. More specifically, it sought to broaden the definition of employer to include sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, and independent contractors. Senator Bradley and others in the legislature at that time were trying to find the appropriate balance between creating more flexible and cost-effective small group plans, but maintain enough protections for consumers to prevent AHPs from draining healthier individuals out of the current small group risk pool. To give this further context, New Hampshire does allow for a similar type of insurance arrangement known as multiple employer welfare arrangements, or MEWAs, as Senator Bradley just mentioned. And what distinguishes an AHP from a MEWA is that under a MEWA, membership is limited to existing trade groups. Over the years, the federal and state governments have made qualifying for a MEWA more difficult, with only a few grandfathered ones remaining, the most well-known of which is the Automobile Dealers Association. So with that as some background, I'll turn to the current state of affairs. As previously mentioned, the discussion around AHPs was sparked here and across the country because of the federal government putting forward a rule to loosen the eligibility and definitions around AHPs to exempt them from the stringent ACA requirements through ERISA preemption. In short, the rule allowed AHPs to not meet state mandates or all the requirements of the ACA if states wanted to go in that direction. However, that rule was challenged in federal court under the argument that the federal government exceeded its authority in issuing that rule, and the lawsuit received favorable rulings in the lower federal courts, which issued an injunction which prevented that rule from going forward. The current Biden administration has put the appeal of the lower court rulings in abeyance. The rule has not yet been rescinded, but it is likely to be changed in light of the court's ruling that it exceeds ERISA. It is my understanding from Senator Bradley that this bill is being brought forward in the event that a future Congress or presidential administration allows expanded flexibility with AHPs to make them a viable and cost-effective option. If this legislation should pass in its current form, it would be in state statute such that New Hampshire could move forward with expanded ERISA preempted AHPs once that flexibility was available. Now, that being said, this bill would set out what kind of requirements and regulations would be built around them. What precisely that would look like is a decision for you, the legislature, to make. There is a current AHP law that is currently on the books that passed in 2019, but as Senator Bradley said, it has some restrictions around it that the feedback is that it would hurt its viability. Under the current law, it would be more difficult to form an AHP, and because of the requirements in place, it would not make them a viable, cost-effective alternative. Whether the legislature prefers the approach before you or the approach currently in statute, again, is entirely a decision for you. But because of the 2019 law, the state is technically not prohibited from allowing AHPs, but they would not fall under ERISA and would therefore need to meet all state and federal mandates. Looking beyond AHPs for a moment to the broader discussion of MEWAs, the insurance department regularly receives inquiries from employers regarding MEWAs. In particular, some smaller businesses are looking for lower cost alternatives. For MIWAs, it's important to remember that there are two options: the fully insured route or the self-insured route. In the case of a fully insured MIWA, state law neither prohibits nor regulates the formation of the arrangement. However, an association would either have to purchase a currently existing plan, or a potential insurer would file a new product with the insurance department. In the event that they were to file a new product in an attempt to be more accommodating to the needs of the MIWA, the carrier would follow the same process as all other insurance products and would bear the same regulations, such as state mandates and the like, that the legislature over the years has put in place. Therefore, that option would not likely produce the kind of cost savings that employers have indicated they are looking to receive. Under the self-insured option, the authorization for it would go through federal ERISA law, and the New Hampshire Insurance Department would regulate them. However, in that case, per state statute, the association would still be subject to state mandates, rating, and oversight, as well as the existing ERISA requirements. So taken together, those factors make it difficult to build a plan that can compete with the bigger insurance carriers that are currently in the market in a way that lowers costs. And given those mandates and regulations that you encounter in a fully insured MIWA, you run into the same hurdles of lowering costs as you do with the fully insured option. So that is a little bit of the background there. And I hope that that not only provides you some information and background regarding AHPs as contemplated in Senate Bill 160, but also the broader picture of what our current state law provides and the, as I said, broader picture of MIWAs overall. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, DJ. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Bradley? No, you're all set. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Cameron?
Senator French, the only other person I have signed up to speak is Curtis Berry. Curtis, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My testimony is very brief. I'm here before you on behalf of the New Hampshire Retail Association, which, as you know, represents both large and small retailers here in the state, but over 90% of their member companies are New Hampshire-based small businesses. On this subject, association health plans and MIWAs, I'm not an expert. And I also want to mention, I understand the need to make sure the language is right, so re-referring is not an issue. But that said, the New Hampshire Retail Association looks at Senate Bill 160 as an opportunity to address health insurance expense for small businesses. It's more than clear that our members are generally continuing to experience health insurance premiums that rise faster than the rate of inflation. Most of them experience health insurance premiums rising faster than the wages they offer. Nearly 2/3 of them cite the cost of health insurance as their primary impediment to hiring new employees. And yet, almost most of them have responded to higher premiums by choosing a plan that either offers higher co-pays for their employees, they ask their employees to pay a higher proportion of the premium, or both, or they move to a plan with a higher deductible, also an additional cost for the employee. The excessive cost of health insurance in the small group market is therefore penalizing employees, obliging them to pay more for the health insurance while potentially inhibiting higher wages, or in some cases not getting the job. So Senate Bill 160 may not be the silver bullet. It's a long road to go, but the Retail Association feels it's a good step to prepare for opportunities that may come along. And I'll wrap up, Mr. Chair, by saying I hope you each had the opportunity to read the Retail Association's briefing before the start of the session. And I want to emphasize the one point they asked the legislature to keep in mind, which is that some of the shift to online shopping that resulted from the pandemic will be permanent. There's no question. The businesses this bill could help, or this concept could help, are not the retailers with a significant online presence. There are small businesses within each of your communities that are facing challenges greater than ever before, and we ask you to help make one of those challenges a little easier. I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Berry.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator French, that's everyone I had signed up. If anyone else wants to speak, they can raise their hand in the Zoom with the raise hand. If they're on the phone, dial *9. I am not seeing any hands, Senator French.
Seeing none, I'll close this hearing on Senate Bill 160. That wraps up our hearings for today. I would like to have a motion to go into executive session so we can vote on a few of these bills and get them.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Yep. Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Senator French says yes. I'd like to bring up Senate Bill 107 first for discussion.
I'll move on to pass.
Second.
We have a motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 107 by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Susie. Is there any discussion? Seeing Senator Gannon?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Never mind.
No. Okay, Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
And Senator French says yes also.
I'll move consent.
Motion for consent by Bradley, seconded by Kavanaugh. Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator French says yes. Would like to take it out.
I'll take it. Oh, Senator Susie.
Senator Susie will take that out. Thank you. I would like to, we're not going to exec 126. I'd like a little bit more time on that. Senate Bill 160, I'd like to bring up.
I'll move re-refer.
Second.
We have a motion of re-refer by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Gannon. Any discussion? Seeing none, Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
And Senator French says yes.
I'll move consent.
We have a
Second.
motion of consent by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Susie. Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Senator French says yes. Senator Bradley, would you like to take that out?
Sure.
Senate Bill 65, the rape test kits. We're going to hold that another week until I have a chance to talk with Senator Susie and a couple of others of you that might have some problems with it. So we'll skip over that. And we'll go to Senate Bill 70, FN.
And I'll move re-refer on this bill also. And let me speak to it, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
You may.
Thank you very much. I've been working with some of the other sponsors of this bill, most notably Senator Sherman, the prime sponsor, as well as Senator Whitley, on behavioral health services for children. There's been a lot of discussion about what services are covered by private insurance relative to not only inpatient when kids are admitted to the emergency room, but also in-home type services. The state of New Hampshire, and a lot of us had a lot to do with it, passed Senate Bill 14 in 2019. Unfortunately, the pandemic not only interrupted the implementation of Senate Bill 14, but it also increased the pressure in particular on young adults or children, given the crisis that so many families have faced and how it impacted mental health. There's been a lot of discussion about what actually is covered by the private insurance companies. And the three of us, myself, Senator Sherman, and Whitley, had a lot of discussions with the carriers. I think I hope I'm speaking for the other two senators when I made it clear during some of those discussions a non-legislative approach is the best approach, as well as the standing up of Senate Bill 14. But given the pressure that so many adolescents are facing and the increasing numbers of adolescents admitted to emergency rooms around the state, I think it's important to hold this bill, continue the discussions that are ongoing in terms of those kids that are in emergency rooms, work with the department as we're coming through, hopefully coming through the pandemic, and they are really trying to ramp up implementation of Senate Bill 14. I think it's important to hold this bill as these other things happen, and hopefully there will not be a need for it through the re-referral process, but it can be considered as we see what unfolds, especially with Senate Bill 14. So that's why I would ask for re-referral.
Mr. Chairman, I would second that motion and echo the comments made by Senator Bradley. In particular, I think it's important that we keep this issue alive as the task force continues to work on these issues, and that we have a vehicle should we reach some consensus sooner. So I do think it's the right move at this time, and I hope that the working group continues to make gains in this area, because it's really a crisis here in New Hampshire.
So we have a motion to re-refer by Senator Bradley, seconded by Senator Susie, and echoed loudly. Thank you, Senator. Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
And Senator French says yes. Do I have a motion for consent? No.
I'm happy to put it on consent. I see Senator Susie shaking her head. I think she wants to ask me a question on the floor. So let's
do that then. That'll
do that then.
Yep.
Thank you.
Now we have Senate Bill 125. Senator Gannon, you ready with that?
I am, but you're doing, Mr. Chairman, you're doing an amendment and you're not ready yet.
Okay, good. We'll hold that for next week.
I think Aaron needs to know who's taking out Senate Bill 70.
I think Senator Bradley will be, so you can ask him a question.
Okay.
And so that's it. We're gonna, do I have a motion to come out?
So move.
We have a motion to come out of executive session by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh?
Yes.
And Senator French says yes. So next week, we have to have all the FN bills out. There's a few out there hanging. We're going to finish the last few bills we have, I believe. We're going to, yeah, I think, Aaron, how many bills do we have left?
We have 4 in total. I also was provided an amendment that will need a hearing since it's non-germane. So technically we have 5.
Okay, so we'll be hearing
what is that
the rest of
amendment?
It is on, Cam, do you remember? You sent it to me.
It's from Senator Waters. It's to Senator Sherman's bill.
138.
Oh, it's for the gold?
The precious metals, yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So next week, we're going to have the last of the FN bills, and then we'll be executing them right after, and then we'll be on time, and no one can complain about this committee. And that, I think we're all done for the day. If anyone wants to make a motion.
Wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa,
Whoa,
whoa,
whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa.
whoa, 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 whoa.
Hey, I've got to smoke. Come on, hurry up.
All right, Cam, you just call me afterwards. Senate Bill 38 was a different bill. It's alternative treatment.
138.
138.
138.
Sorry.
Got it. All right, thank you very much.
Now we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Bradley.
Yeah, we
Senator
gotta get
Susie-
you cooking there, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Bradley,
Yes.
and Senator French says yes. See you next week. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Senator
Thank
French,
you, everyone. Keep that house warm, Senator French.
Yes.
Yeah.
Senator French, just so you know, on judiciary, Sharon's out. She can't get any service, so I'm going to start the meeting and recess it.
Okay, so if I'm
Later
not
date.
there,
Well, just so you knew.